Hey everyone, my name's Sandy Honingsberg. My areas of responsibility and expertise within SuccessFactors are goals, performance, calibration, and compensation, and those are the areas that we're going to be dealing with today in my section of the presentation. So without further ado, let's begin first off by some good news, bad news, depending which end, depending where you're coming from. Goal management interface, the user interface, version 11 is being phased out entirely, as you can see here, starting from Q1 2018. And I can tell you right now that if you have not yet moved or migrated to version 12 for the goal management, there's absolutely nothing to fear and nothing to worry about. It's simply like a provisioning click. And the only thing that changes is your user interface. No functionality changes, and there's no configuration required in order to make the change. It's just a question of taking 5 minutes to learn where the different things are displayed. Now, that's not necessarily the same for performance management. And that is, as you can see here, you can see the dates of where they're going to end up stop maintaining it and when the actual product is going to be put to bed. And in the case of performance management, if you're still on version 11 or on the old beta version of version 12, then you do have to move to version 12 accelerated. And there is configuration work that's required there. That's a simple statement of fact. You've got a little bit of reading space, but not all that much, so you might want to take it into account when you're developing your work plans. And obviously, you want to do it not in the last 3 weeks before a form go live, but rather sometime during the summer when things are a little bit slower. Okay, let's talk about the actual product itself. Version 12 acceleration and things that have been changed. Now, as you can see here, the first item of business is the stack ranker, or what some people call the team rater. For those who are familiar with it, then you know exactly what it is. For those who are unfamiliar, what the stack ranker does, it's an optional feature that you're allowed to use that allows the manager to rate all of the people in his purview when they've reached, the management review step of the rating of the roadmap, and you can do the competency ratings for all the people at the same time. And that allows you to, that way you can know if you're giving somebody a 3, and then you look at the next person, then you ought to have a relative idea of where he is. Is he above or below the person next to him? And everything that you put in here automatically goes back to the performance form. It's just another user interface that that writes directly to the performance form. If you use this, some people find it very helpful. Other people find it more confusing for the managers. That's your call. But as you can see, the actual interface itself has changed a bit. Let's talk about the feedback pod. The feedback pod, as you know, until now has been something that only the manager could initiate and only the manager could view, which is to say the manager via the team overview would initiate a request for feedback. The recipient would get an email asking to provide his comments about the employee being reviewed. And if and when that person responded, then the response would be visible through 2 different interfaces. One was through the team overview itself, and another for the manager was via this pod right here at the top of the performance form. And what the system allows you to do now is to permission it so that the employee himself can see what the feedback was all about. And the theory behind this is, or the theme behind this is, of course, ever greater visibility to the employee. So he shouldn't think that anything is wrong behind their back. So again, you can opt to apply permissioning here that will allow the employee to see his feedback comments. We're talking about minor enhancements. You can read all 4 of these bullets here, but of the ones that are there, the first one, the more important ones that I'd like to point out to you are, number 1, if you've got custom fields on your form, you can now specify that there's a minimum character requirement or a maximum character enablement on custom elements. And for people, this is especially important for Israeli clients, and perhaps for Arabic or other clients as well. Right to left language support has been applied. Obviously, if you're in a Latin-speaking country, if you're using a Latin alphabet, then that last point there will probably be of less import to you. This particular thing that you see on the slide here is a very nice feature. And what it does is, if it's not atypical for the need to move a form, to bounce it forward, to move it back, sometimes at the level of a single form, sometimes for multiple forms at the same time. And you don't always want notifications that are related to that form to go out at the same time. And rather than having to remember to shut down notifications while you're doing it, you now have the option so that for a particular mass routing, you have the option of going down here to that box and clicking it so that for this particular transaction, no documents will be generated. An excellent tool that can be very handy and stop a lot of calls from the field asking, why am I getting this notification when I already finished dealing with that form? Other notable fixed issues, these are, the first one relates to people who are using calculated ratings, and that is that the calculated rating until now was always defaulting to only 2 significant digits. And now you can configure, well, you've always been able to configure it, but the system wasn't always responding to the number of significant digits being applied, and now the system will respond to the number of significant digits. The other 3 points relate to people, or are relevant to people, who are using the system to print their performance form via PDF. And you can see down here there had been some, if you look at the last point, there had been some specific issues related to people using Chrome as their browser, and that too has been dealt with by the system. Finally, the get feedback request had been sent out according to the language of the person initiating the request. And now the system has been updated so it takes into account the local language of the person receiving the request. So that has improved the look and feel of the system at the level of the individual user. And also there was a correction made on ad hoc reports relating to the unrated rating label. Okay, moving on to calibration. If we look at calibration, then basically what's important here is that the look and feel, this is in line with other changes that have been made to the system. Look and feel thanks to the adopting the Fiori interface. People who are used to looking at it, the bins used to be from the bottom up, and they now go from left to right. Functionality hasn't changed, but the look and feel certainly has. Moving on to goal management, you can see here that there aren't that many major changes that were done, but the important one for users is to know that all the available functions that you've been permissioned to on the goal plan have now been collated under those 3 buttons under the action button on the right-hand side of the screen. And you can see that some of them are still available on the main screen itself. If you're talking about edit or delete, assuming that you have permission to do that in the first place, then they're still here in a much easier place in the same easy place for the person to access. Significant effort has been invested by SuccessFactors and by SAP in order to make the system responsive to languages such as Hebrew and Arabic and make them right to left supportive, both in terms of character sets and in terms of the layout of the screens themselves. So, moving into continuous performance management. We've talked about this before, and continuous performance management has become one of the new poster childs for SuccessFactors. And the reason for it is because, again, this is going back to, we found that historically there have been simply too many companies where goals have been defined at the beginning of the business year, and then they pretty much lie dormant. Maybe the odd person will update the status or the percent complete, but they pretty much lie there dormant. Maybe there's a mid-year evaluation, and if not, it's not until the year end that people actually get evaluated on those goals. And unfortunately, people's memories are fallible, and it's important that people have the ability, both employees and manager have the ability to record various events and various achievements that they want to be recognized for during the course of the year, so that in December, January, something that you did, that will contribute to one of your goals, but you did it in June, doesn't get left behind or simply forgotten. So the system has been, they've done all sorts of work here trying to make it more palatable and easier, both easier to configure and to make the configuration tools more responsive to typical scenarios that companies would want to use. So for instance, you can see here, activities is one of the types of things that continuous performance management allows you to do. And you can set up activities and very seamlessly move from an activity to an achievement. And an achievement is something which flows right through from continuous performance management to the goal and ultimately to both the performance form and to the compensation form, so that whenever somebody's looking at something, you're not just trying to rack your memory, but you can actually see things that have been recorded and stored in the system. Another thing that helps for configuration testing is this new tool that the system has applied. They've applied it in other places also within Employee Central, and I believe within Time Off as well. The universal configuration validation tool, which is designed, it doesn't have much relevance to the end user, but certainly for the system owners and the people doing the configuration, it's a tool that allows you to much more quickly find out what got messed up or what got left behind during the process of configuration. That covers us in terms of goals and performance, and let's move on now to compensation and variable pay. This one particular thing is a nice feature, is that they've added a filter for the executive reviewer where you can buy, if you look down on the why is it important, you'll see the typical, an excellent scenario. That is, I'm a senior manager and I've got 20 managers reporting to me at various levels of the organization. Some of them have completed their planning, some of them haven't. There's no reason for me to be reviewing what somebody hasn't yet done, so I can exclude via this new route map filter people where the planning form is still with the planner. And I can just look at those forms that have gone beyond. And that way I can cut back the number of people that I'm actually looking at during the executive review. You may find that a very helpful tool. Also, there have been complaints in the past about the way labels have been aligned on the form, and now it's in the hands of the person doing the configuration to set the label alignment at the top of the column. Now, this isn't done by the user. It's not something that the user can change, but it is something that can be set up at the beginning. So, if something's numeric, you can set the label to the right, and if something is text, you can set the label to the left, or however you want the thing to look. This particular slide is relevant only for people who have already set up their systems in the central compensation integration. Up until now, if you were using that integration where the system was drawing information, compensation was drawing information directly out of the Employee Central database, then you were unable to actually avail yourself of the top-down budgeting or the budget assignments. And now, as you can see, the system has been allowed to do it even for EC-enabled plan templates. Okay, so that may come as welcome news for people who've already completed that integration, or perhaps for people who were holding off on that integration because they needed top-down budgeting. This is a nice feature. If during the executive review you need to make sort of mass changes, you have to add 5% to everybody there. As you can see here, they've added a new function called mass action, which allows you to prorate that amount across everybody on the form, or for specified users on the form, and this can save you having to go in one line at a time over however many people that need to be adjusted. Spot bonuses until now have required the existence of a budget in order to work, and now you can see if you look down here on the form where that's highlighted, you can actually say that no, I'm setting up this spot budget program with no budget, and the system will now be allowed to use it. This is for people using variable pay, this slide here, and it talks about variable pay. People who use variable pay know that one of the primary criteria, one of the primary sets of data that the system uses is the history file, where salary history or assignment history applies a prorating factor across the whole MBO program. And what you've got here is in a simple variable, in a simple MBO setup, okay, you can now set it up so that everything is based on strictly the year-end salary, as opposed to people where, as you can see here, where variable pay uses, it doesn't use the bonus proration, which variable pay uses by default. Now, beta product, things that are in the pipeline, and that is this thing over here on the right, which is the total compensation plan. People who until now have done both salary and discretionary bonuses on the one hand, and also equity distribution via SuccessFactors compensation, know that in order to do the equity, you had to go to a separate tab, because the merit tab dealt only with monetary units, and the equity tab was the one that actually dealt with units, as in 500 options or 2,000 options, etc. And the new total compensation plan is being designed in order to set both types of units on one form, so that you no longer have to jump between tabs. Number formatting, okay, this may be important for the Europeans. The system, typically by definition uses a comma as the thousand separator and a decimal point for the, to separate decimal numbers. And in Europe, it's exactly the opposite. So as you can see here, you're allowed to specify what format each individual user is going to be seeing in their personal compensation statement. Just a couple of small fixes here, and that is, well, it may not be small, but as far as the reporting goes, there have been problems. There were numerous problems, or a number of problems, when trying to publish information from compensation to move it back up into Employee Central. There were validation errors, and the system has worked hard to try to qualify these and correct them. And to wrap up my presentation, I just wanted to point out that there's now an enhancement to the eligibility rules, or the reporting on eligibility rules, so it makes it easier to track down why somebody has been denied eligibility or why somebody still has eligibility where he's not supposed to get it. And finally, for people using the compensation audit report, until now that report was always run online, and you could lose the use of your system depending on how much data you've got in there for 5, 10, I've seen it go as long as 20 minutes while the system was generating that report. The system now uses the same thing they use for all sorts of other places, which is it does a record count, and if the record count exceeds 5,000, then the system will automatically push it through to an offline process, and you can track it down via the scheduled reports and thereby free up your screen. I'm done for now. Thank you for your attention, and we'll see you the next webinar. Be well.